The board was arguing. Not loudly. This was a room full of people who had learned that volume was the last resort of someone who had already lost the point. But the specific tense quiet of 7 senior executives who had each arrived at the meeting with a different opinion, and were now discovering that the 16-year-old at the head of the table had arrived with the only one that mattered. Eva Jones set down her pen. She had her mother's hands. The same long fingers. The same deliberate stillness when she placed them flat on the surface in front of her. She was wearing a soft champagne silk blouse and tailored slate blue wide-leg trousers, her braids pinned up in an elegant structured style, small gold earrings catching the sole boardroom light. She looked, by every visible measure, like someone who had been doing this for 20 years. She was 16 years old. She had been doing this in the specific way that mattered since she was 11. "Mr. Park," she said. Her voice had not changed dramatically from the voice that had said, "We don't have an understanding, we have a phone call," to a man who had spent 30 years making people afraid. It had simply grown into itself. The Southeast Asian expansion is not a question of whether. It is a question of sequence. My mother built this company on the principle that trust preceded transactions. We enter Vietnam first. Not because it is the largest market, but because it is the market where the relationship infrastructure already exists. Indonesia follows in Q3. The Philippines in Q1 of next year. She looked at him evenly. This is not a proposal. This is the plan. Mr. Park looked at Ji-yeon, who was seated at Eva's right hand as she had been for 5 years. Silver-streaked hair, now more silver than streaked. The same sharp, precise features. A deep burgundy rose structured blazer that was new this season. Ji-yeon looked back at Mr. Park with the expression of someone who had stopped being surprised by Eva Jones approximately 4 years and 11 months ago. "The plan," Ji-yeon confirmed. Mr. Park sat back. The room recalibrated. Eva picked up her pen, made a note, looked at the next item on the agenda, and then, without announcement, without any of the theater that lesser people used to signal their arrival, the door at the back of the boardroom opened. "Welcome to Black Silk Stories, the home of Afro-Korean stories that hit different. Subscribe, drop a comment, and do not go anywhere. This is only the beginning." Ji-won Kwon at 17 was, and Eva would never say this out loud because he was insufferable enough already, exactly what she had known he would become. He was taller. Not dramatically, just the specific quiet height of someone whose body had finally caught up with the authority that had always been present in him. He was wearing a crisp cobalt blue fitted shirt and tailored cream trousers, dark Oxford shoes, the thin watch on his left wrist that had never changed because some things were simply correct from the beginning and required no revision. His hair was exactly as it had always been, neat, precise, immaculate. He carried a leather document folio under his left arm. He sat down at the back of the boardroom without a word, opened the folio, did not look at it, looked at her. Eva felt it, the specific awareness of being looked at by someone who had been looking at her since a night flight 5 years ago and had never once looked the way other people looked, never with any of the calculation or performance or agenda that other people brought to the act of looking at Eva Jones. Just attention. Complete and unhurried and entirely its own. She did not look back. She finished the meeting. Afterward, in the corridor outside the boardroom, Ji-yeon touched Eva's arm briefly and said, "You handled Mr. Park well," which from Ji-yeon was the equivalent of anyone else standing and applauding. "He'll come around," Eva said. "He already has," Ji-yeon said. "He just hasn't told his face yet." She looked down the corridor to where Ji-won was waiting, leaning against the wall with the folio in his hands, looking at something on his phone. "He came. He said he had a document to drop off," Eva said. "He flew from Busan," Ji-yeon said. "For a document." Eva said nothing. Ji-yeon's expression held the almost smile that Eva had never seen on anyone else's face until she met Ji-won and understood where expressions like that came from. Families, she had decided, pass things down without meaning to. "I'll see you at dinner," Jian said and left. Eva walked to where Chi-Won was waiting. He looked up from his phone, put it in his pocket, looked at her the way he always did, fully without flinching, with the particular quality of someone who had decided a long time ago that she was worth looking at completely. You flew from Busan, she said. I had a document, he said. Chi-Won. It's an important document. What document? He reached into the folio, produced a single sheet of paper, handed it to her. She looked at it. It was a reservation. A restaurant in Insadong, the small warm place near Gyeongbokgung Palace where they had gone on the first morning of her first Seoul visit, where the elderly owner had said something that made his ears go red. Tonight at 7 p.m. 2 seats. Eva looked at the reservation, then at him. You flew from Busan to hand me a restaurant reservation. The document required in-person delivery, he said. That is not how documents work. It is how this one works. He held her gaze. The almost smile present, brief, completely real. Will you come? She looked at him for a long moment. At 17 he was. She had decided this carefully and without sentimentality, the way she decided everything. The most genuine person she had ever met. Not the most impressive, though he was that. Not the most capable, though he was that too. The most genuine. The specific rare quality of someone who said exactly what they meant and meant exactly what they said and had been doing so consistently since she was 11 years old and he was 12, and he had tilted his head across a first-class aisle and said everything with a gesture. Yes, she said. I'll come. Something moved in his face. Brief. Real. Good, he said. The restaurant was exactly as she remembered. The same worn wooden surfaces. The same ceramic bowls on shelves. The same smell of something slow-cooked and ancient. The same elderly owner, 5 years older, no less sharp, who looked at them when they walked in and said something in Korean that Eva didn't need translated because the expression on Chi-Won's face told her everything. She said it's about time, he said, before Eva could ask. She said that last time, Eva said. She has been saying it for 5 years. He held her chair. He had always done that, not as performance but as the specific instinct of someone who had been raised to take care of the things that mattered. She is a very patient woman. They ordered. The barley tea came without being asked. Eva wrapped her hands around her cup and looked at him across the low table, at the cobalt blue shirt, at the thin watch, at the face she had known across screens and oceans and one first-class aisle and 5 years of Seoul summers and Los Angeles winters. Chi-Won, she said. Yes. Why did you really fly from Busan? He was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone without an answer. The quiet of someone making sure the answer was exactly right before releasing it. Because, he said finally, I have been thinking about something for approximately 2 years and I have decided that thinking about it is no longer sufficient. Eva set down her tea. What have you been thinking about? He looked at her directly, the dark, steady eyes that had been looking at her since she was 11 years old. The same eyes that had seen everything across an aisle and everything across a Pacific Ocean and everything across 5 years of becoming. I have been thinking, he said carefully, that what exists between us has had many names over the years. Friends. The word people used when they didn't know what else to say. The thing that doesn't have a name that fits. A pause. I would like to give it a name that fits. The restaurant was warm and quiet around them. The elderly owner had disappeared into the kitchen with the specific tact of someone who understood the shape of a moment. Eva looked at him. What name? She said. I think you know, he said. She did. She had known for approximately 2 years also. She had simply been waiting, the way her mother had taught her to wait for things that were already true, the way you gave real things the space to arrive in their own time without rushing them. Say it, she said. He held her gaze across the low table in the warm small restaurant near Gyeongbokgung Palace where an elderly woman had been saying it's about time for 5 years. I would like, Chi-Won said with the same precision he brought to everything, for you to be mine. And for me to be yours. Properly. With a name on it. Eva looked at him for a long moment. That, she said, is the least romantic phrasing of that question I have ever heard. I don't make promises, she finished. I know. You make facts. She picked up her tea. She won. Yes. Yes, she said simply. The almost smile arrived. Stayed. Became the real one, full and brief and completely unmanaged. The one that made him look exactly his age, exactly himself, exactly the boy who had tilted his head across an aisle because she was alone with something and that was unnecessary. Outside the small restaurant, Seoul moved through its evening, alive and preparing and completely itself. Inside, something that had been building since a night flight 5 years ago finally, quietly, found its name. 10 years later. Eva was 21 when she understood completely what her mother had meant about the door. Skincare is just the door. Once people trust your skin, they trust your brand. Once they trust your brand, they trust you with other things. The Amelia Jones Group, she had renamed it 3 years ago, formally, with the board's unanimous approval and Ji-Yun's quiet satisfaction, was now in 14 countries. The Seoul headquarters occupied an entire floor of a building in Gangnam, with her mother's name on the lobby wall in brushed gold letters. There were 37 products in the core line, 12 in the luxury tier, and a foundation bearing her mother's name that had funded the education of over 800 girls across sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. Amelia Jones had said the world would trust her with other things. Eva had decided the other things would matter. She was 21 years old and she was, by every visible measure, exactly who her mother had faced forward toward all those years ago. She was also, on this particular Tuesday evening, sitting on a bench beside the Han River in Seoul in an elegant emerald green wrap midi dress, her braids up in a sophisticated style, simple gold earrings, watching the city reflect itself in the water, because Chi-won had said, "Meet me at the river at 7, and she had come without asking why because she had stopped asking why 5 years ago and had never once regretted it. He arrived at 7 exactly. He was wearing a sharp olive green suit and a white dress shirt open at the collar, no tie, polished shoes, the thin watch. At 22 he was, and she still thought this carefully and without sentimentality, the person he had always been becoming. The patience had deepened. The precision had not diminished. The almost smile had learned, over 5 years of being with her, to arrive slightly more often and stay slightly longer. It was still brief. It was still worth more than anyone else's full one. He sat beside her on the bench. Their bench. The same bench from a December evening 5 years ago when the sky had burned orange and gold above Seoul, and neither of them had needed to fill the silence with anything. They sat for a moment without speaking. Then Eva said, "This is the bench." "Yes," Chi-won said. "You brought me back to the bench." "Yes." "Chi-won." She looked at him. "What are you doing?" He reached into the inside pocket of his olive green suit jacket, produced something small, set it on the bench between them, not in her hand on the bench the way he did everything, deliberately without theater in exactly the right place. A ring. Simple. Elegant. A single oval stone, deep green, the color of something chosen with complete intention, set in brushed gold. The most beautiful thing she had ever seen and the least surprising thing that had ever happened to her simultaneously. She looked at it, then at him. "This is not a question," he said. "I don't ask questions when I already know the answer. This is a fact." He held her gaze with the dark, steady eyes that had been looking at her since she was 11 years old. "The fact is, I have been yours since a night flight 10 years ago. I have been making decisions with you in mind since before I knew that was what I was doing. I have flown from Busan for a restaurant reservation and stayed on the phone until every danger passed and tracked a flight from 5:47 a.m. and compiled a 17-stop itinerary, and I have never once, not for a single moment in 10 years, wanted to be anywhere other than exactly where you were." A pause. The absolute stillness of him. I would like that to have a permanent name now. Eva looked at the ring on the bench between them. At the Han River catching the evening light. At the city her mother had walked into at 25 with nothing but a decision. At the man beside her, who had been a 12-year-old boy with a book he wasn't reading and had become, through 10 years of choosing her in every way available to him, the person she had known from the very beginning he was going to be. She picked up the ring. She won, she said. Yes. This is a fact, she said. Yes, he said. Then yes, she said. This is a fact. He took the ring from her hand and put it on her finger with the same deliberate care he brought to everything that mattered. Then he looked at her. At 16 years of knowing her across every distance and every danger and every ordinary extraordinary day in between, and said quietly and completely, always. She looked at the river, at the city, at the ring on her hand, at the man who had set her name in a room when she needed it said. Always, she said back. Soul kept moving around them, alive and preparing and completely itself. The Han River caught the evening light. And on the bench where an 11-year-old girl and a 12-year-old boy had once sat and watched the sky burn orange without needing to fill the silence, two people who had chosen each other across 10 years and a Pacific Ocean sat in the last of the evening light and let the fact of it settle into its permanent place. 15 years later, the rooftop of the building where Amelia Jones had chosen to live was not, on the morning of Eva's wedding, the private access keyed space that Eva had described to a sole prosecutor during the worst week of her life. It was something else entirely. Debbie had been up there since 5 a.m. Not decorating. The florist had handled that the previous evening, white and gold arrangements climbing every surface, soft fabric draped between the rooftop pillars, the Los Angeles skyline serving as the backdrop that no florist could have improved upon. Debbie had been up there since 5 a.m. because she was Debbie, and this was Eva's wedding day, and there was simply nowhere else she was going to be. Mr. Tony was at the door. Of course he was. He was wearing a crisp dark charcoal suit. The first time in 15 years Eva had seen him in anything other than the plain working clothes of a man at his post, and he was standing at the rooftop entrance with the specific steadiness of someone who had been standing at doors his entire professional life and understood that some doors mattered more than others. This one mattered most. Inside the building, in the room that had been Amelia's bedroom and was now a getting-ready suite, Eva Jones stood in front of a full-length mirror and looked at herself. She was 26 years old. She was wearing an ivory and gold wedding dress that had taken 8 months to design. Not because she had been indecisive, but because she had known exactly what she wanted and had refused to compromise a single element of it. The silhouette was clean and structured, the way she liked everything. No excess, nothing that didn't earn its place. The ivory fabric was woven through with threads of gold that caught the light without announcing themselves. At the neckline and cuffs, subtle details drawn from traditional Korean textile patterns. Her specific private acknowledgement of the life she had built across 2 cultures and 2 cities and 1 Pacific Ocean. Her braids were down and long, threaded through with small gold details that Debbie had spent 2 hours placing with the specific care of a woman for whom this was the most important task she had ever been given. She looked at herself in the mirror. She looked, she thought, like the person her mother had been facing forward toward. Eva. Debbie's voice from the doorway, raw and trying not to be. It's time. Eva looked at her reflection for one more moment. Mom, she said quietly, to the mirror, to the room, to the sandalwood diffuser Debbie had placed in the corner because of course she had. Look what we built. Chi-Won was already on the rooftop when she arrived. He was standing at the far end of the aisle, because there was an aisle, a simple one, white petals on the rooftop surface between 2 rows of the people who had earned the right to be here. He was wearing a perfectly tailored ivory suit with subtle gold threading at the lapel, traditional Korean design elements woven into the cut of it. His specific private acknowledgement of the same thing hers acknowledged. His hair was exactly as it had always been. The thin watch was on his left wrist. He was completely still. He was 27 years old and he was the most elegant thing Eva had ever seen, and she was absolutely never going to tell him that. When she appeared at the rooftop entrance, Mr. Tony holding the door, his jaw set with the effort of a man containing something that wanted very much to be visible, Ji-won looked at her. The almost smile arrived, stayed, became something she had never seen on his face before. Not the full smile she knew, not the brief real one, but something beyond both of those, something that had no name in either of their languages, the specific expression of someone seeing the most important thing they have ever seen arriving toward them and having no adequate response except complete stillness and complete presence. She walked toward him, the Los Angeles skyline behind him, the morning light on everything, the people on either side, Ji-yeon in a deep mauve structured gown seated beside Chol-soon, who was wearing a deep midnight blue traditional Korean ceremonial jacket and was looking at his son with the expression of a man who had spent 30 years being unreadable and had decided that today was not that day. Se-ri in a soft burgundy formal dress. Debbie in rich coral pink, already crying, completely without management from the moment Eva appeared, exactly as Eva had known she would. And at the end of the aisle Ji-won, waiting, not impatiently. He had never done anything impatiently in his life. Just present. Completely present. The way he had been present since a night flight 15 years ago, when he had looked across an aisle at a 10-year-old girl who was counting something and decided that was unnecessary. Eva reached him. They stood facing each other, 2 feet apart, the same distance as the arrivals hall at Incheon 10 years ago, the specific distance they had always existed at before closing it. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. The officiant, a warm Korean woman in her 50s who had been briefed extensively on the specific nature of these two people, and had wisely decided to keep the ceremony simple, began to speak. Eva did not hear most of it. She was looking at Ji-won, at the dark steady eyes that had been looking at her since she was 11 years old, at the face she knew better than any other face in the world. The jaw, the cheekbones, the straight nose, the place where the almost smile lived and had been living for 15 years. At the man who had answered before the second ring. Every time. Always. When it was time for vows, Ji-won spoke first. He had written them himself. She had known he would. He was not a man who outsourced the things that mattered, and she had known they would be exactly what they were. Precise, unhurried, the specific economy of a person who used words deliberately and never used more than were needed. "Eva," he said, "I have been making facts about you since I was 12 years old. The fact that you were interesting. The fact that you noticed the same wrong things I noticed. The fact that you were alone with something on a night flight and that was unnecessary." A pause. "The fact that when you turned around, everything was different." He held her gaze. "Today I would like to make the last fact. The permanent one. The one that doesn't need updating or revising because it was correct from the beginning and will be correct at the end." His voice was quiet and certain and carrying the thing underneath it that she had learned to hear. The thing that was warmer and more fundamental than precision. "You are mine and I am yours. That is the fact. It has always been the fact. Today we are simply saying it out loud in front of everyone who was there for the parts that made it true." The rooftop was very quiet. In the front row, Chol-soon Kwon, a man who had spent 30 years in rooms where the stakes were absolute and had never once let his voice or his face show it, pressed his lips together. His jaw worked once. He looked at the Los Angeles skyline for exactly 3 seconds. Then he looked back at his son. And one tear, just one contained immediately, addressed to nobody, moved down his face before he could stop it. Ji-yeon, seated beside him, reached over without looking and placed her hand over his briefly. He did not pull away. Eva watched all of this happen in her peripheral vision while looking directly at Ji-won and felt something rise in her chest that was too large and too complete and too full of every person who had ever mattered to her, living and gone, to be named as any single thing. She took a breath and spoke. "Ji-won," she said, "I have been many things in my life. My mother's daughter. My company's heir. The girl who counted and noticed and held things quietly and completely alone. She paused. And then I was not alone. Because you tilted your head across an aisle and said everything with a gesture, and I have not been alone since. Her voice was steady. She made it steady. You answered before the second ring. Every time. For 15 years. Through everything that tried to make answering too costly or too complicated or simply too much. A breath. I spent a long time thinking that was what I needed from you, the answering. But I understand now that what I needed was simpler than that. She looked at him. I needed you to keep being exactly who you are. Because who you are is the best thing I have ever had the privilege of being next to. A pause. You are mine and I am yours. That has been the fact since a night flight 15 years ago. Today we are saying it out loud. In front of everyone who earned the right to hear it. Chi-Won looked at her. The almost smile. The real one. The one beyond both. Always, he said quietly. Always, she said back. The reception was on the same rooftop as the sun moved across the sky, and the Los Angeles light changed from morning gold to afternoon brilliance. There was food. Debbie had overseen the catering with the specific authority of a woman who understood that food was love made practical and had not compromised a single dish. There was music, something understated and warm, the kind of music that held the space without filling it. Chul soon found Eva at the edge of the rooftop an hour into the reception. He stood beside her, large and composed in his midnight blue ceremonial jacket, looking at the Los Angeles skyline with the expression of a man who had come a long way, in every sense, to be standing in this city. You are happy, he said. Not a question. Yes, Eva said. Good. He was quiet for a moment. Your mother would have. I know, Eva said gently. I know. He nodded. Looked at the city. She arranged everything, he said quietly. The flight. The connection. All of it. And still, I don't think even she could have arranged this. He gestured slightly, at the rooftop at the people at Chi-Won across the space laughing at something Ji-Yeon had said, the real laugh, the complete one. This she left to you both. Yes, Eva said. We did the rest. He looked at her. Yes, he said. You did. He reached into his ceremonial jacket and produced something small. A photograph, worn at the edges, the colors faded. He held it out to her. She took it. Her mother at 25. Standing in Seoul. Unsmiling. Already building something. On the back, in Amelia's handwriting. Take care of my girl. I kept the original, Chul soon said. I wanted you to have it today. Eva looked at the photograph for a long moment. At her mother at 25. Younger than Eva was now. Standing in a city that would eventually hold the shape of everything Eva had become. Thank you, Eva said. For taking care of her girl. Chul soon looked at the skyline. It was, he said simply, the easiest thing I have ever done. 15 years later, 2 years after the wedding, the office in the Los Angeles apartment was not the same as her mother's study. It was adjacent to it, the room next door, which had been a sitting room when Amelia was alive and which Eva had converted 3 years ago into her working space. She had kept her mother's study exactly as it was. The desk, the bookshelves, the closed panel in the bookshelf behind which the safe sat empty. The sandalwood diffuser that Debbie still kept running. The Cape Town photograph on the wall. She worked next door. But she kept her mother's room exactly as Amelia had left it because some rooms were not meant to be changed. They were meant to be kept the specific way you kept things that were finished and complete and did not need to become anything else. Eva's office was different from her mother's study in one significant way. It had a small play corner in the far left, a soft rug, a low shelf of books and toys, a bean bag in the shape of something that might have been a bear and might have been something else entirely, about which Mia had very strong opinions that changed daily. Mia was 2 years old. She had her father's eyes, dark, steady, carrying the particular quality of someone who was already watching everything with complete attention, and had been doing so since approximately the third week of her life, which had alarmed the pediatrician and delighted Chi-won in a way he had expressed by simply nodding once as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. She had her mother's braids, or rather, she had the beginning of them, the small neat sections that Eva twisted every Sunday morning with the same deliberate care that Debbie had once used to thread gold through Eva's hair on a wedding morning. She had her grandmother's name, Emilia, Mia, the name that had made Debbie cry for 20 minutes when they announced it and had made Chul-soon go very still and then nod once slowly, with the expression of a man receiving something that was exactly right. On this particular Tuesday morning, Mia was sitting on the desk. Not beside it, on it. She had climbed up with the specific determination of a 2-year-old who had decided the desk was where she needed to be and had made it happen before anyone could intervene. She was sitting cross-legged beside Eva's laptop, playing with a small wooden toy that Chi-won had brought back from a trip to Kyoto, completely unbothered by the 3-page market analysis open on the screen in front of her mother. Eva was reading the analysis and eating toast and occasionally moving Mia's toy back from the edge of the desk when it migrated too far. Normal. Ordinary. The specific, beautiful ordinary of a life that had been built from everything extraordinary. Mia, Eva said, without looking up from the screen. The toy stays on the desk. Mia looked at the toy. Looked at the edge of the desk. Looked at her mother. Pushed the toy slightly closer to the edge. Mia. Mia pulled it back. Looked at her mother with dark, steady eyes that said everything without saying anything. The specific expression of someone who had made a decision and was simply waiting for the right moment to execute it. Eva looked at her daughter. At the dark, steady eyes. At the complete, unhurried patience of a 2-year-old who was, Eva had accepted, going to be exactly like her father in every way that would simultaneously delight and exasperate her for the rest of her life. "You are so much like him," Eva said. Mia smiled, wide and sudden and completely unmanaged, the specific smile that was all her own, that belonged to nobody before her and would belong to nobody after, the smile of a small person who was entirely herself. Eva's heart did what it always did when Mia smiled. Completely. Without management. The door of the office opened. Chi-won, in a deep mahogany-fitted sweater and dark tailored trousers, the thin watch on his left wrist, his hair exactly as it had always been, looked at the desk. Mia sitting on it. At Eva sitting behind it. "She climbed up again," he said. "She has her father's sense of where she's supposed to be," Eva said. "She has her mother's determination to get there," he said. He crossed to the desk, picked Mia up. She went to him with the specific ease of a child completely certain of her reception, and held her against his shoulder and looked at the market analysis on Eva's screen. "Vietnam is ready," he said. "I know." Eva looked at the screen. "Q3. Q2, he said. She looked at him. The relationship infrastructure is stronger than the Q3 projections account for, he said. My father's network has 3 existing connections in Ho Chi Minh City that Jian hasn't factored in yet. Eva looked at the screen. Looked at him. Send me the contacts. Already sent, he said. She shook her head slowly. The same slow wonder she had felt at a crosswalk in Seoul 10 years ago. Encountering someone who simply was who they were completely and without apology. Chi-won, she said. Yes. I love you. He looked at her. The almost smile, still there, still brief, still worth more than anyone else's full one. 15 years and a daughter and a marriage and a company in 14 countries and 1 Pacific Ocean later. I know, he said. That's it? I know. It's accurate, he said. You have known that I know for 15 years. It does not require a new response every time. It absolutely requires a new response every time. Eva. Chi-won. I love you, he said. Simply. Completely. With the same precision he brought to everything that mattered and the same warmth underneath it that she had learned to hear in the spaces between his words. I have loved you since a night flight 15 years ago when you were counting something across an aisle, and I thought, that person should not be alone with that. She looked at him, at Mia on his shoulder, who had fallen asleep with the wooden toy still in her hand, completely trusting, completely present, exactly where she was supposed to be. At the Cape Town photograph visible through the open door of her mother's study, Amelia laughing at the ocean, head thrown back, completely alive. At the market analysis on her screen, at the 14 countries, at the brushed gold letters on a lobby wall in Gangnam, at the foundation and the 800 girls and the 37 products and the 12 in the luxury tier and everything her mother had built the door to and Eva had walked through and kept building, further, bigger, exactly as she had promised at 11 years old, standing at a kitchen island with the world just ended around her. She stood up, took Mia from Chi-won, her daughter warm and sleeping, the wooden toy in her small hand, and held her against her shoulder and walked to the doorway of her mother's study, stood in it, looked at the room, the desk, the bookshelves, the sandalwood diffuser, the Cape Town photograph. Amelia laughing at the ocean, young and careless and completely herself in the specific way she only ever was when nobody needed anything from her. Mom, Eva said quietly, to the room, to the photograph, to the sandalwood and the desk and the closed safe and the 15 years that had passed since 6:09 on a Thursday morning in November. Look what we built. She looked at her sleeping daughter, at her daughter's dark, steady eyes, closed now, dreaming whatever 2-year-olds dreamed about, at the small face that held in its particular combination of features every person who had mattered, Amelia's cheekbones, Chi-won's patience, something entirely her own that had never existed before and would never exist again. Mia, Eva said softly. Her daughter did not wake. The world is very large, my love, Eva said, and we are going to make our mark on it. Behind her, Chi-won put his hand on her shoulder, warm, steady, exactly the right weight. She leaned back into it. The sandalwood diffuser glowed. The Cape Town photograph held its light. And in the study where Amelia Jones had built everything, where she had sat at her desk on 1,000 mornings facing forward, always forward, toward her daughter, always toward her daughter. The daughter stood in the doorway with her own daughter on her shoulder and her husband's hand warm on her back and the whole vast world ahead of her. Exactly as her mother had always known she would. This has been Black Silk Stories. And this has been Eva and Chi-won. 7 episodes. 1 epilogue. 15 years. 1 Pacific Ocean. 1 night flight. 1 tilted head across an aisle that said, "You don't have to be alone with that." To our Black Silk Stories family. Everyone who was here from the first 60 seconds, everyone who dropped a comment and pressed subscribe and came back episode after episode and stayed through every cliffhanger and every frozen frame and every car that should not have been there. This story was built for you. Every word of it. Eva Jones was built for you. Chi-won Kwon was built for you. Little Mia, sleeping on her mother's shoulder with a wooden toy in her hand. She exists because you stayed. Thank you. From the bottom of everything we have built here together. Black Silk Stories is not finished. It is like Eva standing in that doorway, like Seoul always preparing, like a city that breathes differently, only just beginning. Subscribe. Drop a comment. Tell us what this story meant to you. Tell us which moment broke you open. Tell us which episode you are going back to watch first. And stay close, because where Black Silk Stories goes next, you do not want to be left behind.